Okay, is it recording? Perfect. Okay, this is episode 3 of the Cornerstone. So yeah, the email basically arrived on a Tuesday morning at 9:47. Subject line was a formal notice, POPIA compliance monitoring exercise. No greeting, no small talk, just a reference number and a 30-day response deadline and a list of 8 documents the information regulator wanted to see immediately. You see, the founder who received it, let's call her Nomsa. Nomsa runs a 28% fintech in Rosebank, which is where I currently work. And she had spent about 94,000 Rand the last quarter upgrading her endpoint protection. You see, she had hired a penetration testing firm. She had even printed the POPIA compliance poster and stuck it on her kitchen wall. But when she opened that email, she realized something that made her stomach drop. And this is what you need to understand, because she had the infrastructure, she had the spend, but what she did not have was the paperwork to prove it. And as of mid 2026, the paperwork is what separates the operators who get discounts from the operators who get fines. So Nomsa did what most founders do when they get a regulatory notice. She called her lawyer, then she called the IT guy. Then she spent about 3 days pulling together screenshots, invoices, policy documents, and a half-finished data flow diagram she had started about 6 months ago and abandoned. You see, the information regulator did not care that she had spent the money. They cared whether she could demonstrate in writing with dates, with signatures, that she had built a system that met the Act's requirement. And here's what Nomsa learned in those 3 days. You see, the 94,000 Rand she had spent on security was not the problem. The problem was that she had treated it as a operational expense rather than a compliance asset. You see, she had bought the tools, but she had not built the record. You see, and that distinction alone is worth about 18,000 Rand a month in her specific case. And I'll show you how I got to that number. You see, before I go further, I want to address 4 objections because I know they are coming and I would rather meet them now than to let them fester in your head while you listen. So the first objection is these procurement regulations are draft, not final law. So the comment period closes on the 15th July. And you're probably asking yourself, why panic about something that might change? Which is a fair distinction, but the draft regulations shape behavior before they become law. The procurement officers are already reading them. The evaluation criteria is already shifting. The Public Procurement Act itself is currently facing a constitutional challenge that was heard on the 18th to the 19th May. You see, the regulations are being drafted in the shadow of that uncertainty, which means that the framework is live, even if the exact wording shifts. So the founders who wait for the final enactment will be betting against operators who prepared 6 months ago. So the draft is the signal. The final law is just a confirmation. And you have about 18 days to submit the comment, not 6 months, you have 18 days. That's the first objection. The second objection is the POPIA has been around since 2021. So nothing has changed. So why act now? Which is also a fair objection. But until about 12 months ago, the information regulator had about 130 staff and 1 office. You see, they were overwhelmed. In 2025, they got organized. The fines are real. The code recovery proceedings are real. The sectoral monitoring is real. And on 22 of May this year, they issued an enforcement notice to Central Johannesburg TVET College. And TransUnion has also faced the enforcement action. So the window of informal tolerance is closing. You see, the fact that nothing happened for 4 years is not evidence that nothing will happen. It is evidence that the enforcement curve was flat before it went vertical. The third objection is this does not apply to small companies. We are a 15-person team. The government does not care about us. which is completely false because the new procurement regulations bind any institution using public funds. So national departments, provincial governments, municipalities, state-owned enterprises, your public universities, your hospitals, these institutions buy from SMEs every day. You see, the 14% information officer registration rate applies to all CIPC active companies, not just the large ones. So if you sell to any entity that touches public money, this applies to you. And the last objection is this is just compliance fear mongering and that I'm trying to sell you something. And I want to get this clear because I do not sell security products. I do not sell compliance software. I do not sell legal services. I sell intelligence. And the intelligence says that the regulatory environment is shifting materially has shifted actually materially in the last 10 weeks. And it's either you can act on it or you can ignore it. But one thing you cannot say is nobody told you. And that's basically the objections. And right now I'm basically gonna talk about the regulatory squeeze itself. So something changed in the South African regulatory enforcement in April and May of this year. You see, it was not announced with a press conference. It happened in a quiet accumulation of documents and fines and procurement circulars. You see, on 16 April 2026, the National Treasury published the Draft General Public Procurement Regulations 2026. These regulations operationalize the Public Procurement Act of 2024, and they represent the most comprehensive overhaul of government purchasing in decades. So the comment period was originally set for the 15th June, but on the 12th June, National Treasury extended it to the 15th July 2026, which is 18 days from today. So the draft runs about 100 pages, but one clause should stop every operator in their tracks. You see, Regulation 68 mandates that procuring institutions must implement a quote-unquote a comprehensive risk management framework that identifies risk at every stage of the procurement process. You see, that includes infrastructure risk, financial risk, environmental risk, corruption risk, and supplier risk. What this means practically is if you are to sell to the government, you must now prove that your own operational risk profile will not infect the institutions buying from you. So the regulations explicitly require debarment registers for non-compliant vendors. They require better security vetting. They require a contract management system that track compliance and enforcement accountability. So the state is not saying be secure. The state is saying prove you are secure in writing with dates and signatures, or we cannot legally give you money. So 5 days after the procurement regulations dropped, on the 5th of May 2026, the information regulator presented its 2025 annual performance plan to Parliament. You see, the presentation was dry, but the implications was not. The regulator received about 2,898 security compromises notifications in 2025 to 2026, as of March actually. So that is not just spreadsheet figures. That is 2,898 mornings where a founder opened an email like Nomsa's. That's 2,898 afternoons when IT manager had to explain to the board why the customer data was exposed. That's 2,898 instances where trust, the only currency that does not devalue, took a hit. So that is up from 202 in 2021 to 2022. It is a 15-fold increase in under 5 years. Some of that is better reporting. A lot of it is a genuine deterioration in the data security environment. The regulator has acknowledged publicly that they struggle with responsiveness, and they have about 130 staff, one in Gauteng and 1,320 open matters. So here is what matters for you. These guys, they are not just overwhelmed, they are getting aggressive. So the enforcement record now includes the Department of Justice. They received about a 5 million fine contested in court. Playbook municipality received a 500,000 fine for recovery proceedings active and judicially backed under Section 109 of POPIA. FT Rams Consulting received between 100,000 to 200,000 fine for recovery proceedings active. Lancet Laboratories, also the same figure, between 100 to 200,000 fine, which is paid. This came, they had an enforcement notice for a 3.6 million record breach. TransUnion had an enforcement notice for access control failures, and Central Johannesburg TVET College had an enforcement notice issued on the 22nd of May. You see, the regulator has also settled with WhatsApp over its 2021 privacy policy update, with the settlement now being reduced to a court order. And the Minister of Basic Education has successfully challenged the regulator in court over the matric results publication ban. The High Court set aside the enforcement notice, but the regulator has applied for leave to appeal, which means that the president is still alive. And perhaps most importantly, only 14% of the CIPC active companies have registered an information officer. You see, that means roughly 420,000 South African businesses are technically non-compliant with a basic statutory requirement. The regulator knows this. The monitoring exercise Nomsa received is not random, and it is the beginning of a systematic sector-by-sector compliance testing. So the window for informal resolution is closing. So the regulatory environment has shifted. Compliance is no longer a future problem, it is a present gate. And the founders who figured this out early are not just avoiding fines, they are extracting money from the fortress they have already built. So coming up, I'm going to talk about the fortress discount, how to turn your security documentation into a direct P&L weight. So let me make this concrete. SITA or SITA, the State of Information Technology Agency, budgets 8,788 billion in rands in revenue for 2026 to 2027. So these guys, they control access to national and provincial department ICT contracts. To bid, you must be SITA accredited. To be accredited, you must meet technical BBEE and increasingly security standards. A typical government ICT tender in 2026 now carries a mandatory cybersecurity requirement. So the SOC monitoring, the the penetration testing, the backup and DL testing, endpoint protection, firewall management, and government frameworks, these are not preferred qualifications. They are mandatory specifications. So it is not just government. Enterprise procurement in South Africa is following the same trajectory. The POPIA compliance certificate is becoming a standard vendor onboarding requirement. The cyber insurance policy is becoming a contractual precondition. The penetration test report is becoming a due diligence document. What this means is your security spend is no longer just about protecting your own data. It is about proving to other people that you can be trusted with theirs. And the documentation you generate in the process, and I'm talking about your logs, the certificates, the test results, those are becoming a tradable asset. So the direct cost for a POPIA compliance fine is between 100,000 to 10 million rand, depending on the severity. But the direct fine is really the biggest hit. So legal fees to respond to a regulatory notice, that's between 50,000 to 200,000 rand. Operational disruption, while you pull together documentation you should have had basically ready a long time ago, that's 3 to 6 weeks of management attention. Reputational damage if the fine becomes public, that's unquantifiable, but it's real. So one healthcare provider in the market saw a 50% client churn spike after a breach notification hit their use. And then there is the opportunity cost. You see, while you're managing a compliance crisis, your competitors are bidding on contracts you are now disqualified from. The government tender with a 30-day response window does not wait for you to get your house in order. So the total cost of a non-compliance is not just the fine, it is the fine plus the legal fees, plus the operational disruption, plus the lost contract, plus the reputational damage. You see, it is unbounded and it is entirely avoidable. So here's the counterintuitive part. The operators who have built documented compliance systems are not just avoiding costs, they are capturing a dividend that most of their competitors do not even know exists. So when you walk into an insurance renewal with a folder containing your POPIA information officer registration, your quarterly penetration test reports, your endpoint protection deployment logs, I'm talking about your backup, restore test results, your incident response plan, your staff training records. You see, you are not just checking boxes, you are changing the risk profile the underwriter assigns to your business. So global insurers are tightening underwriting standards and rewarding documented controls with better terms. So Marsh reports that organizations with continuous monitoring and documented security postures receive more stable premiums and broader coverage. So Marsh's Cyber Accelerate program, in partnership with AWS, they cite that an average saving of 15% for customers with specific security configurations. The Forrester research found a 10% cyber insurance rate reduction for organizations with enforced application control and a unified audit visibility. You see, the South African market is following the same trajectory. The SME side insurance premiums currently range from roughly 2,000 to 50,000 annually, with entry-level products as low as 200 Rand per month. But the spread between a standard premium and a discounted premium for documented hardening is widening. So underwriters are asking more questions. They are requesting actually evidence, and the companies that can produce it are negotiating from a position of strength. So that is the fortress discount. It is not a marketing promise. It is a structural feature of a market where risk is increasingly priced with precision. So let me walk you through the arithmetic. Let's say company A spends about 85,000 a month on security. They have the tools, they have the endpoint protection firewall, the backup systems, but their documentation is like scattered. There's no centralized log of penetration tests, no formal incident response plan. The staff training happened once 2 years ago, and nobody kept the attendance sheet. So the cyber insurance premium is like between 42,000 a year, which is basically a standard rate. But the underwriter priced them as a average risk because they had no evidence they were better than their average. That's company A. And company B, let's say they spend the same 85,000 a month on the same tools, but they have built what I call the Insurer-Ready evidence pack. So these guys, let's say they have quarterly pen test reports with executive summaries. They have like monthly backup restore test logs with timestamps and success confirmations. Let's say these guys have what do they call it? Biannual staff phishing simulation results with click-through rate trends, and let's say they have a documented incident response plan that was tabletop tested 6 months ago. How about the POPIA information officer registration and the data flow diagrams and asset registers? You see, the cyber insurance premium based on global underwriting trends and conversations with brokers in this market. So documented hardening of this caliber can shift premium trajectories significantly. So toward the low end of the SME range, which starts at roughly 2,000 Rand annually, but more realistically sits between 15,000 to 25,000 for a company with real data exposure. So even a conservative 20% to 30% reduction on a 42,000 Rand premium saves 8,400 Rand to 12,600 Rand a year. You see, this is not the main event. The main event is what happens at the renewal when the underwriter sees 3 years of clean logs of past tests and no incidents. You see, the premium trajectory bends downward, the coverage terms broaden, and the deductible drops. So over 5 years, the documented operator saves more on insurance than the undocumented operator spend on documentation. And that is before we even talk about the procurement itself. So I recently reviewed a bid for a provincial ICT contract worth about 3.2 million Rand. The winning bidder did not have the lowest price. They were 12% more expensive than their cheapest compliant bid. But they won because their submission included a compliance appendix. You see that most competitors did not even submit. These guys, they had cyber insurance certificate, they had SOC monitoring agreement, they had like quarterly pen test schedules, and they had even the ISO 27001 and alignment roadmap itself. And they had even the POPIA compliance declaration itself. You see, the evaluation committee had a scoring matrix. For technical capability, that's 40 points. For price, that's 30 points. For the BEE, that's 20 points. And for security and risk management, that's 10 points. So most bidders treated the 10-point security section as an afterthought. They wrote 2 paragraphs about their antivirus software and called it done. And the winning bidder submitted a 47 pages of documentation. I'm talking about your policies, your certificates, your test results, your governance frameworks, and incident response protocols. These guys, they scored a 9.5 out of 10 on security. The nearest competitor scored 4. That 5.5 point gap was enough to offset a 12% price premium. That's a 35% gross margin. The 3.2 million contract generates about 1.12 million in gross profit. The competitor who was 12% cheaper did not win because their security documentation made them look risky. The winner won because their documentation made them look inevitable. You see, this is the procurement multiplier. The fortress discount is not just about insurance saving. It is about winning contracts that undocumented competitors cannot even bid for. So there is also a third return that most operators miss until they have lived through it. And when the information regulator sends a compliance monitoring notice, you have about 30 days to respond. The operator would scatter documentation, spends about 3 weeks of management time pulling it together. The operator with evidence pack spends about 2 hours printing the relevant section. You see, 3 weeks of a foundless time built and opportunity cost is roughly 75,000 to 120,000 rand. 2 hours of admin times is 400 rand. The difference is the cost of being organized versus the cost of being reactive. And if the regulator escalates to an on-site assessment, which they are increasingly doing, the documented operator walks the inspector through a binder. You see, the undocumented operator watches their team scramble for 3 days, hoping they can find the policy document they know they signed but cannot locate. The audit cost avoidance is not sexy, but it is real money and it compounds. And every clean assessment builds a track record. Every track record reduces the probability of future assessments. Documented operator becomes invisible to regulators because they have already proven they are not a problem. So let me add it up for a 30% tech company doing, let's say, about 12 million a year. Insurance savings over 5 years, that's between 40,000 to 60,000 rand. You see, procurement advantage on one additional contract or on documentation strength is between 1.12 million rand in gross profit. The audit cost avoidance, let's say 2 regulatory interactions over 5 years, that's between 150,000 rand to 240,000 rand in saved management time. And the total 5-year yield from documentation is somewhere between 1.3 and 1.4 million rand. So the total cost of building and maintaining the documentation is roughly between 15,000 rand to 25,000 rand a year in the staff time and external support. That's 75,000 rand to 125,000 rand over 5 years. The net position is a positive of 1.2 million to 1.3 million rand. So your compliance documentation is not overhead. It is a yield-bearing asset with a return that most venture capitalists would kill for. And unlike a future product, it does not depreciate. It appreciates with time. And every quarter on clean logs makes the next quarter cheaper. Every past audit makes the next audit faster. And then every warrant contract makes the next bit stronger. The fortress discount compounds over time. So what exactly do you build? And I'm going to give you the specific documents, the specific organization, and the specific rhythm to have. And this is basically the part where you have to actually take notes. So let's start with the Insurer-Ready evidence pack. It has about 6 sections. You update it quarterly and you present it at every renewal. You see, you keep a digital copy and a printed copy because some underwriters don't want to touch paper. So the first section is governance. That will include your POPIA Information Officer registration confirmation. That will also include your data protection policy, your data flow diagram, where personal information enters, where it lives, and where it leaves. Your asset registers of all systems that process personal information, that's important. Your cross-border transfer assessments, and if applicable, and a note that the regulator has a guidance note on the cross-border transfer forthcoming. So this is an area to watch. That's section 1. Section 2 is your technical controls. That will include your endpoint protection deployment report, how many devices, what software are you using, and when have you last updated it. You're also going to need your firewall configuration summary itself, and you're going to also need your network segmentation diagrams, and also your MFA coverage report. What percentage of accounts, what methods you use, and what are the exceptions documented. Your patching cadence reports, that's also important because critical patches applied within 72 hours, that's really important within the high of 14 days. So that's section 2. Section 3 is your testing, your quarterly penetration test report, one executive summary and remediation evidence, with your monthly backup restore test logs. That includes your date to your scope, your time to restore, your success confirmations. How about your biannual phishing simulation results? That's also important. That needs to also include your kick rate, your report rate, your trend over time. And finally, your annual disaster recovery test reports. You see, that's section 3. Section 4 is the incident response. Your documented incident response plan. That includes your tabletop exercise report from the last 12 months, your actual incident log. Even if it's empty, the log proves you are monitoring. So you need to include that, and your communication templates for your breach notification, that's important. And remember, since on the 1st of April 2025, all breach notification must go through the regulator's e-service portal, not through email, because the portal is what you need to submit all your regulatory services. So section 5 is your training. That's your staff training records. That will include your dates, your attendees, your topics and assessment results. Your information officer training certificate, that's also important. Your direct marketing team training, if applicable, given the April 2025 regulatory changes that now require recorded telemarketing calls, and strengthened consent workflows is also important. And section 5, which is your third-party management. That will include your vendor risk assessments, your processor agreements, your cloud provider security certifications, your insurance certificates, which includes your cyber and professional indemnity and D&O. So 6 sections, updated quarterly. And it has to be presented as a single package. So this is what changes the conversation with an underwriter from what do you have to here is what we have built. So the procurement compliance folder is a subset of the evidence pack. It's tailored for burn submissions. So you do not submit 47 pages every time, and you submit the specific documents the tender requires, which is formatted to the evaluation criteria. So for a typical government ICT tender in 2026, that means that you have to have a cyber insurance certificate, which has to also include the current and naming the client as additional insured where required, the SOC monitoring agreement with a 24/7 coverage specified, penetration testing schedule with last report and next test dates, your backup DR test results, which has to be within the last 6 months, your endpoint protection deployment confirmation, that's also important, and the firewall management agreement with OEM update compliance, Your governance framework summary, that includes your ITIL, your COBIT, or your ISO alignment. And lastly, your compliance, your POPIA compliance declaration with the information officer details. You see, you build this as a template. So every new tender you customize in hours, not days. So the competitor who is like scrambling to find new pen test reports is already 2 weeks behind. And finally, because this is the one that arrives without warning, the POPIA response protocol. So when a breach happens, you have 72 hours to notify the regulator, not business hours. That's 72 hours from discovery. And since the 1st April 2025, a notification must go through the e-service portal, which is no exception. So your protocol needs 5 pre-built components. And the first one is the incident triage checklist. Who discovers it, who assesses it, and who decides it is reportable. That's the first protocol. The second protocol is the notification template. Preloaded in the portal itself with your organization's details, your information officer contact, and your standard data subject categories. The third protocol is the data subject communication template, because you must notify affected individuals and the notification must be specified enough to meet POPIA's requirements. The fourth protocol is the legal contact, a data protection lawyer who knows your business and can review the notification before it goes out. Your fifth protocol is your post-incident review template, what happened, why it happened, and what was done, and what will be done differently. So you do not build this during a crisis, you build it now. And you test it with a tabletop exercise. You update it quarterly, because when the breach happens at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, you do not want to be searching the internet for a portal login. So that's really important. So here is the final reframe, and I want you to sit with it because this is really important. The fortress discount is not a one-time saving. It is, think of it as a compounding advantage, and the mechanism itself is very simple, which is having a track record. You see, when an underwriter reviews your renewal in year one, they see 3 months of clean logs and one past pen test. That is better than nothing, but it is thin. But in year two, they see 15 months of clean logs, 4 past pen tests, 2 clean backup restores, and no incidents. The risk profile shifts. And in year three, they see 27 months of continuous documentation, a trend of improving phishing simulation scores, a disaster recovery test that came in under recovery time objective, and a POPIA compliance history with no regulatory interactions. At this point, you are not just a better risk, you are a different category of risk. So, underwriters price categories, not individuals. And the category of documented tested incident-free operator attracts different insurers. That's for coverage, lower deductibles, and multi-year terms. You see, the kind of terms that undocumented competitors cannot access at any price. You see, the same dynamic applies to procurement. A bidder with 1 year of compliance documentation is credible. A bidder with 3 years of continuous certification is inevitable. You see, enterprise procurement teams have long memories. They remember the vendor who submitted incomplete security paperwork and caused a 3-week delay. They remember the vendor whose documentation was so thorough that the evaluation was seamless. So the track record is the only asset that appreciates automatically. So you do not have to market it. You just have to maintain the documentation. And this is where the competitor geometry gets interesting, because the operator who starts documenting now is not just capturing discounts today, they are building a moat that becomes harder to cross every quarter. A competitor who decides to start building documentation from scratch in 2028 will need 3 years of continuous logs before they match your track record. You see, by then, you will have 6 years. The gap widens not because you are doing more, but because you started early. This is the compound yield of compliance. It is not about being perfect, it is about being consistent. You see, every quarter of clean logs documentation is a brick in a wall that your competitors will find increasingly expensive to climb. So in a market where 86% of businesses have not even registered an information officer, the operator who has 3 years of documented compliance is not just better positioned. They are in a different league in itself. So I want to close with something specific and time bounded. You see, the comment period on the draft General Public Procurement Regulations closes on the 15th July. That is 18 days from now. So if you are a BEE, or actually it's actually B-BBEE, but it sounds way more smoother if you just say B, but you'll get me. The BE supplier or the SMB, they are set aside opportunities in those regulations, but only for compliant vendors. So the operators who submit comment, who register the information officer, who build the evidence pack this week will be the ones bidding in 6 months. So the operators who wait will be reading about the new rules in a compliance notice they did not even see coming. If you are sitting in an office in Rosebank or Cape Town today and you're looking at your compliance notice or an insurance renewal or a tender document and feeling like the paperwork is a distraction from the real work, you need to stop, because the paperwork is real. The documentation is the product. The fortress discount is not just a side effect of security. It is a primary term. So build the evidence pack, maintain the rhythm, document everything. Because in 2026, the operators who can prove what they have built are the ones who get paid for it. So stay safe, stay structured, and stay uncrashable.